Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Rabia Mahmood and welcome back to lecture number 31 for the course History of English Language. Before this, in our previous lectures, we have discussed a lot about language. We have looked at the historical perspective of the language. We have looked at so many of the different things that are related to language. Today we are going to move far from language and we are going to move into the one scientific regime or the scientific area of the language that is known as linguistics. So we are going to move from language to the discipline that is known as linguistics. Today we are going to carry out a formal discussion on linguistics. It is going to be a formal discussion because what I realized all over my lectures, I have seen that there are so many references from linguistics. There are so many, we have been talking about different branches of linguistics in one way or the other. We have been looking at different concepts of linguistics. So I think that towards the end of our semester, I would introduce you to at least the basic concepts of linguistics, that what linguistics is, what it entails, what are its major concerns, what are different approaches in linguistics, what are different, what is the scope of linguistics, what is the use of linguistics. So I designed today's lecture according to those needs. I actually just wanted to give you a general, broader idea about the linguistics. I will try my best to cover up as much of the things as is possible, but perhaps definitely I will not be able to go into very much details of all the components. Rather, I'll be just looking at that from just a surface view I'll be giving you. But we will be touching base on all the relevant concepts that are relevant to linguistics. So let's start today's lecture. Firstly, with the definition of linguistics. As you know, everything starts with the definition, so I thought that it should start with the definition of linguistics. Linguistics can be defined as a scientific or the systematic study of language. Yeah, it is scientific or the systematic, the two very, very important words in this definition. Scientific or the systematic study of language. It is a science in the sense that it scientifically studies the rules, systems and the principles of human language. It is scientific, the reason it's written. Why? Because it is going to scientifically look at each and everything. It is going to scientifically study the rules and the systems and the principles of the human language. It will look at that scientifically. But it is systematic as well. The study of linguistics is systematic as well. Why and how it is systematic? It is systematic in the sense as it deals with the systems, with different levels of system on which we can study language. Another a concept that who is a linguist. Throughout our course, throughout our semester, we have been talking about linguists, that linguist says this, the scholars say this. Let's see that what a linguist actually is and how it has been defined by the people. Linguist is anyone who studies a language with a purpose to describe and explain any topic related to the language. True? Yeah, I hope it's true. It's anyone who studies a language with a purpose to describe and explain. The purpose is to describe and to explain what? Any topic related to the language. That would be related to the language. The focus, linguist is what a linguist is doing, is studying the language. It is looking at the language, it is describing the language, it is analyzing the language, it is explaining the language, all the topics that are related to the language. not always need to form a theory. There is not always a need to form a theory, but it will be sufficient to produce a body of observations that are systematic, or even to systematically state that what is already known for others for description or the pedagogical purposes. This not always need to form a theory, but it will be sufficient to produce a body of observations that are systematic. We are not always saying that whatever a linguist would study, it is going to form a theory. Sometimes they are not going to form a theory. They are systematic. They are even to systematically state, they are systematically studying, they are systematically stating what is already known for the description or the pedagogical purposes. Observers rather than the participants. Linguists are what? Linguists are observers. They are observers how? Because they are observing the thing. They are not participants. They are not part of that. They are distant observers. They are looking at different things. They are reporting it. They are noting it down. They are talking about this. There are some misconceptions about linguists as well. The first misconception is that linguists are capable of speaking many languages. Yes, please, for God's sake, just keep one thing in your mind. A linguist is not a person who can speak more than one language, or who is expert in more than one languages. No, this is not the way. A linguist is one who is observer, who is researcher, who is studying, who is carrying out the scientific study of the language, who is capable of speaking many languages. This is a wrong thing. Please don't call him or her a linguist. Sometimes it is confused with the translators and the interpreters. Yes, another misconceptions. The people who translate, the people who interpret the data, sometimes we call them as linguist. Is it so? No. This is not true. This is not true at all. This is a misconception, because linguist is not that. But they can write a grammar of a language she cannot speak. Look, they are saying that linguists are those people who can write a grammar of the language. Can it be possible? No, it can't be possible. They cannot write a grammar of the language. A linguist is interested in all languages of the world. How can this be possible? How can one single human being can be interested in all the languages of the world? We have seen that how many billions of languages that are there that the people are speaking. So how can a linguist be interested in all the languages of the world? No, this is again a misconception. A linguist is one. Let's go back to the slide so that you can have a clearer idea. Is anyone who studies the language, a language, perhaps one language at a time, or perhaps more than one languages. But the purpose is that he or she is studying, looking at in detail analysis of the language, trying to explain any kind of topic that is related to the language, trying to describe any topic that is related to the language. He is an observer, not a participant. Linguistics is guided by the three canons of science. We are agreeing that linguistics is a scientific study. It's a scientific study of language. How? The first one is that there are the three canons of the science. There are the three characteristic features of the science. The first one is exhaustiveness, second is consistency, and the third is economy. The three features of the three canons of science. Exhaustiveness, it strives for thoroughgoingness in the examination of relevant materials. Linguistics, we are talking about the scientific principles that are applicable, that can be implemented on language, on linguistics. The first principle is what? It is exhaustiveness. It strives for thoroughgoingness in the examination of relevant materials. It will strive, it will keep struggling for thoroughgoingness, for thorough detailed analysis in the examination of the relevant facts, in the examination, in the checking, in the analysis of the relevant details. The second is consistency. That is, there should be no contradiction between the different parts of the total statements. There is no contradiction. So linguistics has the proven facts and without contradictions. The third is economy. Other things being equal, a shorter statement or analysis is to be preferred to one that is longer or the more complex. Economy, one things being equal, other things being equal, that other things that are being equal, a shorter statement or analysis is to be preferred to one that is longer or the more complex. The shorter things must be preferable rather than the larger contexts. What does it mean? It means that economically it must be affordable. Economically, the small things must be affordable rather than the complex and the larger and bigger things. So linguistics has all these three scientific principles, the scientific guidelines to follow in it. There is another thing, that linguistic is scientific, as we say, because it believes in imperialism. It is imperialistic knowledge. It is imperialistic in nature. What is imperialistic? That imperialistic is knowledge that is based on observation. It is imperialistic. So another quality of science. Linguistics has two main purposes. One, that it studies the nature of language. Look at the first purpose. It is what? It is studying the nature of language and tries to establish a theory of language. It is trying to establish a theory of language and describe languages in the light of the theory established, and it would try to describe the languages in the light of the theory established. See what is being done, what kind of process it is. It looks at the nature of language. The nature of language is looked. Tries to establish a theory. By looking at the nature, they are going to establish a theory, and then describes the language. Looking at that, they are trying to describe the language in the light of the theory established. The other is that it examines all the forms of the language in general. The other is that it examines all the forms of language in general and seeks a scientific understanding of the ways in which it is organized to fulfill the needs it serves and the functions it performs in human life. Yes, the outer cover, the framework is that of scientific framework. That's why we say that linguistics is the scientific and systematic study of language. Now, a few things. How does linguistics work? We are saying, okay, we are agreeing that it is it follows all the scientific process, it is systematic. How does linguistics work? What is the process? What steps does it follow to be scientific? Is there any scientific steps that linguistics is following? How does it reach its findings and conclusions? What are the processes actually? These processes are, firstly, it starts with the first step of scientific study, that is introspection. Introspection, a thought, an insight, an intuition, an internal thought that comes on. Second, it observation. It starts observing the things, as I told you that it is an empirical study. It starts observing the things. it believes in the observation, it notices each and everything that is going on regarding a language. Then discretion, it tries to describe it in its discretion. Then there is hypothesizing. When one thing is already described, then they starts hypothesizing. Hypothesizing is actually the scientific process where you are forming one hypothesis. Yes, okay, that this is because of this thing. You have formed one hypothesis, one idea. So you are hypothesizing. Then experimentation. You have formulated one hypothesis. Now you are judging that hypothesis. How? You are judging it through experimentation. Modeling. You are focusing on some model that okay, that this is the way that we should do it. Your experiment is guided by some modeling process. Then you are theorizing. Once you have made one model, then you try to formulate some kind of theories that this thing, this experiment resulted in this thing. So these are all the processes of linguistics. These are all the processes of science. And this is how that linguistic derives its findings and conclusions. It starts from the first aspect with the intuition, introspection, moves on to theorizing the things. Now some important distinctions in linguistics. These important descriptions are these things. There are the 7 important features that we say that makes it linguistics, that makes distinct, that makes the scientific and the systematic study of language different and distinct from others. The first one is speech and writing, descriptive versus prescriptive, synchronic versus diachronic, lang versus parole, competence and performance, functionalism and formalism, theoretical grammar, or the linguistics. Yes, the first characteristic feature of linguistics is what? Oral language versus written language. How? Language was first in the spoken mode. Yes, it was analyzed, it was found in the spoken mode. We know that the first mode that language is found in is spoken. There was an oral culture. It started from the oral culture. There was orality was there. So the oral culture and the oral traditions, it means the first focus was on spoken mode. Speech is not the same as writing or the vice versa. Definitely speech is something else and the writing is something else. This carefully organizing ideas in mind while writing. Whatever we are speaking, it is extempore. It might not be organized, but it can be organized in some way. But while we talk about writing, writing is not random thing. One thing that you must know, that writing is not a random thing. Writing is a complete process. It's a complete 3-step process that everybody follows while they're writing. There is the first step in the writing process is pre-writing, then comes writing, and then comes rewriting. Hopefully you would have gone through these 3 steps in your other course, but this was just to give you an idea that writing is not random, it is organized. Ideas bore in mind instantly and spontaneously in speech. Ideas bore in mind while you are speaking. The ideas are coming down, the ideas are being bombarded into your brain and you are just uttering it. It is spontaneous, it goes quite fluently and very rapidly. However, oral language is richer than the literal language, because when you are writing, so what you are doing, you are being more particular. You are being more conscious about each and every word that you are using, whereas when you are speaking, your speech is less formal, is less is not that much conscious. It is more richer. You have a lot of range of the variety. The second aspect of linguistics is that descriptive versus prescriptive. It is said that linguistics is descriptive rather than prescriptives. What do these two words mean? Descriptives actually where you are describing the phenomena, where you are looking at one thing and you are telling, where you are creating something. It is description. It is describing the thing. Whereas what is prescriptive? Where you already have some prescribed rules as there were in the traditional grammar. You already have the rules and you are trying to follow those rules. There is a prescriptive thing. So the differences between descriptive versus prescriptive. They represent two different types of linguistic study. Descriptive, to describe the facts of language, linguistic usage as they are and not how they ought to be, with reference to some real or the imagined ideal state. To describe the facts of linguistic usage as they are, not how they ought to be. Very important line. To describe the things, if you are saying that you are talking about linguistics and linguistics is studying some phenomena, linguistics is going to read something, some phenomena, so what is happening? Linguistics is looking at the things, at the language. It is just describing as a thing, as a reality is. It is not saying that how it should be, how it ought to be, that how they ought to be. That what they are not describing actually about, they are not talking about the more standards. Rather they are elaborating the language as the way they are. Prescriptive is a term used to characterize any approach which attempt to lay down rules of correctness as to how language should be used. There are that would tell the rules, the rules, not the rules, rather the study of a knowledge, a branch of knowledge that would deal with the prescription of some rules, that deals with the notion of correctness, that says this thing is correct and this thing is not correct. But what does linguistic do? Linguistic is more descriptive. It will just look at the phenomena of language. It would just look at the things as they really are. It is not going to tell, okay, this thing is wrong, this thing is correct. Linguistics is not judgmental, will not judge the things according to the set standards. Rather, it would describe the things. The next concept for the introduction of linguistics is that it is synchronic versus diachronic. Synchronic linguistics, languages are studied at a theoretic point in time. One describes a state of language, disregarding whatever changes might be taking place. And then diachronic languages are studied from the point of view of the historical development. For example, the changes which have taken place between old and modern English could be described in the phonological, grammatical and semantic terms. Yes. The first is synchronic. Just remember one thing. The synchronic is this. This is horizontal. It is looking at the aspects of language this way. Horizontal means at the present moment of time. At the present moment of time. At one time, let's say if we are, linguistics is synchronic as well as diachronic as well. If we're talking about world Englishes, and we are looking at the contemporary Englishes only, at the Englishes of 2012, we are, if a study that is being carried out at this period of time over anything and it will be taking into consideration all the present languages, all the present aspects, so it would be, what would it be? It would be synchronic. The next is diachronic. Diachronic is this one. Diachronic, that deals with the historical evolution, with the historical development of the things. Diachronic. Languages are studied from the point of view of the historical development. For example, the changes that would have taken place between old and modern English could be described in the phonological, grammatical and the semantic terms. If we are looking at, as I was saying, if we are exploring the phenomena of world Englishes, and we are carrying out a diachronic study, we'll be looking at all the historical periods that have been passed, and we'll be moving to the present period later on. This is diachronic. The next important aspect in linguistics is langue versus parole. Langue versus parole, again the French influence. Langue, the language systems shared by a community of the speakers. Langue is what? The language system. It's a system and it's shared by the community of the speakers. Who are speaking it, they would be sharing it. There is parole. Parole is the concrete act of speaking in actual situations by an individual speaker. In simple words, you can say that langue is the ability of speaking a language, and parole is the actual, when you are actually speaking it. That is langue and parole. These are the two important concepts that are that would come in the study of linguistics as well. Langue, it is actually the French word and its meanings are language, and parole, the meaning of parole is a speech. And linguistics terms used by Ferdinand de Saussure. We are going to look at Ferdinand de Saussure later on in our today's lecture. Langue describes the social impersonal phenomena of a language as a system of science, while paroles describe the individual personal phenomena of a language as a series of speech acts made by a linguistic subject. Parole is the series of speech acts where we are speaking. These are the speech acts where we are speaking and doing something. Fine. Whereas langue is the ability, the competence that one person has, is the art that one person can have. It's a skill that a person can have. Competence and performance, then we come almost the same related terms, but were given by the two different people, and we are going to look at those people later on in our study today. Competence is a person's knowledge of his language, as like of langue, the system of rules which he has mastered so that he is able to produce and understand an indefinite number of sentences and to recognize grammatical mistakes and ambiguities. Is a person's knowledge of his language, the system of rules which has mastered so that he is able to produce and understand. Competence with which he can use it, he can speak up and he can do certain things, with which he is mastered and he is able to produce and understand an indefinite number of sentences and to recognize grammatical mistakes and ambiguities. It is actually the competence, your ability, your hidden talent that is there in you. Performance as that of parole. Performance, the actual realization of language knowledge. Actual realization, when you are actually asked to speak up, that is performance. Language seen as a set of specific utterances produced by the language speakers, as counted in corpus. D.H. Hymes' communicative competence, he talked about. D.H. Hymes is a very, very famous name in linguistics. And Mac Holliday. Mac Holliday is again a very, very famous name in the history of linguistics. So I'll be coming towards Halliday later on in the lecture. Linguistic potential and actual linguistic behavior, he has talked about that. The sixth influence on linguistics is that of functionalism and formalism. Let's see that functionalism is what and formalism is what. Functionalism or functional linguistics refers to the study of the forms of language. It refers to the study of the functional form of language in reference to their social function in communication. It refers to the form of language in reference to their social functions in communication. It would be, it is the form of language that is used with the reference to the social function that of communication in that specific context. It considers individual as a social being and investigates the way in which he or she acquires language and uses it. The two important words, he or she acquires language and uses it in order to communicate with others in his or her social environment, where they are trying to actually acquiring language. Functionalism is about the form of the language and the function of the language. How the form of a language, what is the form of a language that is acquired by a person, and what are the functions of that language is performing in his or her life. Then it means that it is also going to look at the language acquisition, how it is acquired, and the second aspect is how it is used. How it is used in order to communicate with others in the social context. The representative of this concept was Mac Halliday, and he has given systemic functional grammar. Systemic functional grammar, I'll be elaborating this just a moment back. Just a moment later, I'll be elaborating about this thing. Formalism or the formal linguistics is the study of abstract forms of language. Formalism or the formal linguistics is the study of the abstract forms of language and their internal relations, that how they are interlinked with each other. It fixes on the forms of language as evidence of the universals. It fixes on the forms of language. It is going to fix on different forms of language as the evidence of universals, without considering, without thinking that how these forms, functions in communication and the ways of social life in different communities. It would be looking at that aspect as well. And the representative of this thought was that of Noam Chomsky, and he talked about this thing in transformational generative grammar. Let me elaborate firstly systemic functional grammar, and the second is transformational generative grammar. One is known as systemic functional grammar, SFL, transformational generative grammar. This concept is given by Halliday, TGG. Concept was given by Chomsky. Systemic functional linguistics. He has talked about systemic functional grammar, or SFL, or rather sometimes it is also regarded as SFG, systemic functional grammar. Systemic functional grammar that was presented by Halliday is that grammar that looks at the systems and the functions of a language. What are the systems? the systems that underlie, that are there, the different levels of language, it is going to analyze it in the systems of the language. Then comes the functions, that what are the different functions that language is performing, what are the different words, what are the different functions that the overall one construction is performing. It was a study of systemic, functional and grammar, where the focus was on the systems and the focus was on the functions. It deals with the functional aspect of the language. Then when we come to TGG, transformational generative grammar. Transformational, with the things were transformed. Transformationals mean, transformational grammar, generative grammar deals with the transformational rules of the language. What are these transformational rules? Transformational rules are those rules that deals with the process of transformation. And now the question is that what is this process of transformation? Where the surface structure are transformed, the way the deep structures are transformed into the surface structure. That process is known as transformation. The deep structure is transforming into surface structure. Now the question is that what is deep structure and the surface structure? Deep structures, Chomsky actually gave this theory, and he said that there are some vocabulary, there is a grammar, there are the words and a complete bank of the words, a collection of the words is present into our mind. That is the deep structure. Into the it is already reserved by the God into our mind. That is what? That is a specific set of vocabulary. We can he says that it is preserved into our mind, and when these are transformed, when these deep structures are transformed into the surface structure, we use all those vocabulary items, we use all those systems, and we transform them, and we utter the sentences, and we write down the sentences, we use the vocabulary. That is transformation. Transformation of the deep structure and the surface structure. Generative grammar. Generative grammar, because according to Chomsky, that this grammar, we have some limited, some finite set of vocabulary items into our mind, and by using these limited vocabulary items we can generate infinite numbers of sentences, numerous language expressions. That is generative grammar. So he talked about transformational generative grammar, a grammar that would utilize the process of transformation and that helps in producing, in generating the numerous sentences. That is a part. These are the two grammars that were presented by the two main people of that era. Theoretical grammar and the linguistics. Primary concern of theoretical grammar was that it is explaining the quest. What is language? Not just English, but all the languages. Okay? One important point, that linguistics would look not at one specific language, rather it is going to explain, it is going to look at the quest, it is going to search for all the present languages. It is going to look, it is going to give respect, it is going to give describe the rules of all the present languages of the world, not one specific language. Identifying and determining the basic constructs common to all human languages. Identifying, it tries to identify and determine the basic constructs common to all human languages, that are common to all human languages. It would try to do that. Developing models of language to present a compact and efficient explanation. Developing models of language, it would try to develop the models of language to present a compact and efficient explanations. It also tries deals with the linguistic universals as sought in phonology, grammar, and semantics. What are linguistic universals? The linguistic universals are those universals that are similar in all the languages of the world. Examples of the universals are what? All languages have vowels as a, and every language has a subject, I, you, he, etc. How does linguistics differ from the traditional grammar? A very important question. While you are perhaps, this question would be coming into your mind, that whatever I am talking about, it seems as if I am talking about grammar. But there is a huge difference between traditional grammar and linguistics. See how. Linguistics is descriptive, not prescriptive. Do not prescribe rules of correctness. 1 point. Fine. It is not prescriptive. It does not prescribe the rules. It does not of correctness. It does not say that this is all right, that it should be done this way. Rather, it gives respect to all the languages, and it is in the favor of acceptance of everything. Language changes all the time. Linguists do not judge but observe this. Different to has been changed into different from. So, different to different from, it is what the linguists are doing. They are only observing. They are not the participants. They are the observers. They are observing it. Linguists regard the spoken language as primary, not the written. They would regard it as the spoken language, not the as primary language, not the written. As it was in contrast to the traditional grammar, where more emphasis and the more focus was given to written grammar, to the traditional grammar. Whereas what linguistic do actually, linguistic pays its more focus on the speech, because for them speech is more important rather than the written, rather than the writing. Writing systems are derived from the vocal sounds. This is what they believe. They say that all the writing systems are derived from the vocal sounds. So these are no more different. How does linguistics differ from the traditional grammar? Some more things. Linguistics does not force language into a Latin based framework. So true. As we were saying earlier, that linguistics is not prescriptive. It is descriptive. It does not it does not prescribe some framework that is already there. So it does not forces the language to fit into the Latin based framework, whereas the traditional grammar, as you know, it was derived from there. So the traditional grammar had a very strict, rigid system of Latin based grammar. In the past, textbooks assumed that Latin provides a universal framework into which all languages fit. For example, for John is a dative case, but it is not true, as English does not have a Latin type case system. Latin tense division is natural for all the languages. Threefold distinction: 1 present, 2 past, and the 3 future. Simple, progressive, and progressive, perfect, progressive tenses are there. However, in some languages, expressing the duration of an action is more important. So linguistics allows you to be more creative, to be more innovative, to be more flexible, rather than forcing you into some rigid system of some specific framework. Traditional grammar versus modern linguistics. There are the 3 more criteria for defining them. Number 1, exclude linguistic facts such as we can't, taller than me. It would exclude the facts that are there. The traditional grammar is going to exclude the facts, some important linguistics facts, as we can and taller than me. Use written material as the material for analysis. Traditional grammar is going to use the written material as a material for analysis, whereas modern linguistics will not do so. Apply Latin-based model to all the other languages according to traditional grammar, but not according to modern linguistics. Yes, we have actually talked a bit about diachronic and synchronic. This is a little more explanation of that. Synchronic study exploring contemporary use, contemporary, present at one period of time, that is horizontal. Diachronic, examining of a linguistic phenomena or describing the language change over time, that is a historical linguistics. This is diachronic and this is vertical axis. Reference grammar. It includes almost all the rules in a language. It is used for getting specific details of a language and learning how particular features function. Sound patterns, morphological, syntactical rules, etc. There are some people who have given grammars about language. Then some pedagogical grammar in the linguistic. Let's see that what does it have to say. It is designed for the language teaching purposes. Yes, as I was saying you that language also deals with this, that linguistics is also deals with this aspect of pedagogy, where the teaching is the main aspect. There are some methods that have been devised according to linguistics perspective to inform the students, to inform the teachers that these are the ways to teach them in the best possible way. For syllabus designers and the language teachers, yes, pedagogy is about the syllabus designers. There are certain ways that have been described to the syllabus designer, that these are the rules for designing some syllabus, or the processes have also been identified. Based on the usefulness and the ease of learning, most of the time the pedagogical techniques are based on the usefulness, that to what extent they can be used. Then some exercises, explanations and descriptions are there in pedagogical grammar or the linguistics. The contents and the priority changes from one context to the next context as different needs arise. It prescribes the teaching of the most learnable aspects of grammar, pronunciation and vocabulary. Linguistics versus traditional grammar, a few more things. Linguistics describes rules and does not lay down rules of the correctness. It is describing, not the prescription. It is that traditional grammar is regarded, spoken language was important in traditional grammar, whereas in written language it is not important. Thirdly, traditional grammar is based on the Latin framework, whereas it is not based on the modern linguistics is not based on that specific framework. Now we are moving on to some core fields of linguistics, and we are going to look at some micro and macro aspects of linguistics and look at some of the components that are there in the microlinguistics. Microlinguistic investigation on some smaller scale, that is micro, micro small, macro larger scale. If we are talking about the microlinguistics element, definitely we are talking about the analytical approach to language, where we are trying to analyze the language at smaller, detailed, in-depth study of language we are going to carry out. And the branches that deal with the micro level investigation are phonetics. Phonetics about the production and the perception of speech sounds. Phonology, use of sounds in the language. Morphology, word formation. Syntax, sentence structure. Semantics, meanings of the words, we all of us know, and how they combine into sentences. Yes, see, phonology, syntax and semantics. Phonology matlab sounds, syntax means grammar, semantics mean meaning. They are what? They are bread and butter of linguistics. They are bread and butter. Together they constitute the grammar of a language. They make up and they make the grammar of the language. So this is the micro-linguistic investigation where we are trying to look at in detail. Phonology, syntax and semantics is equal to grammar, or sometimes morphology plus syntax plus grammar. They are the other part of the language. Some macro-linguistics investigation that are carried out on some broader level is firstly is that of pragmatics. We know which link language with the external world. Yes, we know we are moving from the one sentence unit, we are expanding its meaning. Pragmatics, which link language with the external world. Sociolinguistics, the study of language and society. Yeah, we already know. Historical linguistics, the study of language change. 2Ds, diachronic and synchronic change. Till Ferdinand de Saussure, diachronic approach was used. We are going to look at it in the upcoming lecture. These are just the macro-linguistic investigations that are carried out. Then psychological linguistics is there. That is about the study of language and the mind. First, language acquisition. Second, language acquisition. These are the two. While we are talking about the study of language in the mind, so we are also looking at the language acquisition process. Applied linguistics. Within applied linguistics, we have educational linguistics. We are exploring the concepts of education and the linguistics. Speech pathology, the issue of language and the speech and pronunciations. Application of linguistics to the language teaching, to the teaching methodology, that comes under applied linguistics. Then when we come to anthropological linguistics, we try to analyze the study of language in the cross-cultural settings. The study of language in the cross-cultural settings. Computational linguistics, the use of computers to simulate language and its working. Fuzzy logic, artificial intelligence. Yes, computational, where we are using computers, some latest technology in the study of linguistics, that becomes computational linguistics. Stylistics, the study of language and literature, where we are going to look at the text. We are trying to find out some stylistic features of the text. Philosophical linguistics, the link between language and the logic. Logical thought is known as philosophical. Linguistics typology, the study of different language types, different types of the language are known as typology. For example, isolating, analytic Chinese, one morpheme, one word, no affixes, agglutinating, inflecting, Latin, Greek, English, depth structures according to the functions in a sentence. Linguistic typology, while we are looking at the different types of the languages that are present for one specific language, that is known as linguistic typology. So you would have noticed that what a great range of areas are there. Linguistics is such a vast umbrella term. It's a great vast fact that talks about different it talks about different disciplines, it talks about different fields of linguistics. Now coming towards the approaches to the linguistic studies, the same approaches, prescriptive and the descriptive linguistics. Prescriptive, how the recent use of language should be like. Fine. Prescriptive, ये होगी to prescribe the rules. How the recent use of language should be like means we will be looking at that, and descriptive will try to just describing how languages are currently used. We'll be just describing, and shortly we can say that prescriptive is equal to how should a language be used, and descriptive is that what are languages and how they should be used by the speakers. Now the key figures in the history of English, in the history of linguistics. Actually these I'll be just talking about the two important people. One who's known as the father of linguistics, who initiated it, and the one who is the most recent, the most influential linguist and who has given extensive theories regarding language. The first is Ferdinand de Saussure, a French linguist. Sorry, it's not French, a Swiss linguist, who is the founder of structuralism, modern linguists, semiology. These are his different works. Look at this, is the picture of Ferdinand de Saussure. He actually introduced a book in 1916, Linguistics. He gave different concepts. The one concept that we have already discussed is diachronic and versus synchronic. It was given by Ferdinand de Saussure, and he believed that that language should be studied diachronically rather than synchronically. Then Lang versus parole, we have already discussed. Lang is the the one thing that you have, and parole is the actual utterance of the words. The ability, Lang is the ability. Syntagmatic versus paradigmatic. Syntagmatic again on the horizontal level, and paradigmatic over the period of time. He said that there is a relationship of syntagmatic and paradigmatic between the language. Signifier versus signified. He gave the concept of signifier and signified. Signifier means there is one, if I am talking about pan, pan is a word and pan is a signifier, and this actual pan is, this is a signified. He talked about this relationship in the very earlier eras. This is the most important concept, so I have written it separately. Lang versus parole. Lang, the abstract linguistic system shared by all members of a speech community, and parole, the realization of the language. Now comes Chomsky. This is a picture of Chomsky. He's a very recent linguist. He's a founder of transformational generative grammar. He's a revolution to the structuralism. It was introduced. He has given the theory of deep structure and the surface structures. The deep structures, the bank of vocabulary that already lies in our minds, and the surface structure, well, we speak it and we bring it to the surface, and when we write it we bring it to the surface. LAD and LAS. LAD is actually an acronym. LAD, language acquisition device, and LAS is language acquisition support system. He says that the God has already imparted human being with the LAD and LAS. There is always an acquisition device, language acquisition device, and it needs language acquisition support system. These LAD and LAS actually, when they are activated, then they started acquiring the language from the external environment. He gave the concept of universal grammar, and then he gave the concept of transformational generative grammar. He talked about cognitive linguistics as well. Cognitive linguistics, as I was telling you about LAD and LAS and the deep and the surface structure, cognitive linguistics was about that mentalistic theory of language learning. He gave the mentalistic theory where he said that the language is learnt by some already found blueprints in our mind. There are some things that are already found in our mind. It is not the society, nothing else just works. This is only the brain that works, and it helps in the acquisition of the language. He focused on the vast and the unconscious set of the rules he hypothesized must exist in the minds of the speaker. In 1957, he gave his theory of syntactic structures. In 1965, he talked about the aspects theory of syntax. Chomsky's views, as I have already discussed, perhaps I won't be going into more details of these things. Just the competence and performance. Competence is again the ability, and performance is the actual use. So, overall, we can say that what is linguistics? That it's just a recapitulation of what we have already done. That linguistics is the scientific study of language. There are many branches of linguistics, and while we were looking at the core field of linguistics, we were saying that there were microfields and microlinguistics and the macrolinguistics. And those micro and macrolinguistics, they already have a few of the branches of linguistics, including applied linguistics, historical linguistics, psycholinguistics, computational linguistics, and sociolinguistics. These are some of the branches. These branches, people have been carrying so much researches in these branches that they have emerged as individual disciplines in the community. They have emerged as a separate system, as separate separate fields, separate disciplines. Internationally, and they are the separate sciences people are carrying out research in. Now, a few of the uses of studying linguistics. There are actually, I have divided these uses from 3 perspectives. The first one, I'll be talking about the student of language, for a teacher of foreign language, for a researcher. For a student of language, to know the general properties of the language can help the students to have an overview of the human language, which in turn will stop him from asking unnecessary questions. Definitely, if a student know about the language, that how it was originated, how many speakers are there, how they are spoken, it would have an overall idea about language. So it would stop him by asking unnecessary questions. For a teacher of a foreign languages, linguistics is really very, very important, because it will definitely benefit a great deal from the knowledge of the linguistics. Simply, it will he or she will learn about not only how language is pronounced or structured, but also how it should be presented to the learner's language. A teacher would also know, would not only know that how each level of language system is related to the other level, all the levels that we talked about in our previous lectures, but also how language is closely related to many things outside itself, such as the mind, the brain, and society, among other things. So it is really very, very useful. For a researcher, it is again important. This is even more scope for displaying his abilities. For a researcher, it is really linguistics is important. I myself is a linguist. I myself is carrying a researcher of linguist. I'm carrying out researches, and I know that how beneficial it is for me. I can look at the language. I can carry out any kind of analysis, because it's been too long since I have been looking at the structures of the languages, and I'm trying to identify different features that are hidden, that are explicit as well as implicit in the language. I have been trying to find out. Secondly, linguistic research is going deeper and deeper, often from the mere description to logical and the philosophical explanations. It is going really deeper. It is really getting more complex. So it would be really very beneficial for a research to carry out research in linguistics. Thirdly, linguistics is becoming more and more interdisciplinary, which means that it draws on the findings of other disciplines while it also sheds light on their research. A very, very important and the real fact of linguistics. While when I talk about my research, my PhD research, let's say, I say that is a broader area is linguistics. Then it has applied linguistics. It has the instances of sociolinguistics. It derives its instances on cultural studies, on media studies. These are different implications where my research can go. It is actually a good combination of so many things. So linguistics is interdisciplinary. It is getting interdisciplinary. It is involving the rest of the disciplines as well. So towards the end of our lecture, we can say that linguistics actually tries to answer these questions. Firstly, that what is language? How does a language work? What do all the languages have in common? Is there any language universal? What range of variation is found among languages? How does human languages differ from animal communication? How does a child learn to speak? How does one write down and analyze an unwritten language? What do languages change? To what extent do social classes differences reflected in the language, and so on? There can be 1,000 other aspects of linguistic analysis. Summary. With this, we are coming towards the end, and towards the end I would like to introduce you to a summary of my lecture. Today we have discussed in detail the definitions of linguistics. We have looked at some of the misconceptions about linguist, and we have come to the conclusion that a linguist is a kind of researcher in the field of language who describes the language, who does not prescribe it. We have looked at the distinctions in the linguistics. We have looked at the linguistics versus traditional grammar. We have tried to find out certain differences that are there. We have looked at the two most important key figures of linguistics, Saussure and Chomsky. Then we have also looked at the uses of studying linguistics for a researcher, for a language teacher, and for a student as well. With this, we'll end up this lecture, and for the next lecture, that is the last lecture of our semester, I'll be back. Till then, please take very, very good care of yourself, and Allah Hafiz.